Hey everybody, it is Mike Young with aPlantBasedDiet.org, and we're back with another in our great video series, informative and fun, I think, video series with Dr. Nick Borja. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, well, it's great to see you again, hear from you again, and of course, as usual, we're talking about evidence-based medicine here, and the topic today is kids' microbiome. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, just like you said, Mike, I like to try to stay ahead of the literature and really make sure that we're aware of the latest, most cutting edge nutrition science research. So there's a new study that just came out in the past month where researchers did an exhaustive accounting of the way the microbiome of children responds to dietary changes. We've known for a long time that kids right when they're born, so neonates is typically what we call them, and then infants, so before age 2, they respond to a large degree based on the method in which they're born, their exposure or intake of breast milk versus formula. All of these things can have a big impact on their microbiome health down the road. And so these researchers wanted to see, well, what happens from age 2 to 9? Does the way these kids eat actually make a difference in terms of how their gut microbiome gets established? What kinds of species live in the gut microbiome, and the diversity of those species?
Okay. All right. Well, you are, as in case folks out there know or don't know, are director of lifestyle medicine. And typically, when we're talking about lifestyle medicine, I think we're talking about adults. So in this case, we're talking about children, like you said, 2 to 9, I think you mentioned.
Yes.
We all know, I mean, if you're a parent, if you're going to be a parent, if you know anybody who's parents, if you know about your own parents, most likely they are very concerned about you, and they want the best for you. In fact, I think most parents want their kids' lives to be just a little bit better than their own. So
Absolutely.
what do you think parents need to know about this for their growing kids? Of course, 2 to 9, that's they're around a lot of influences, a lot of peer pressure, habits set in. What should they do during this time frame?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you set up the context of this question really well. I have 2 kids that are in that age range. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so my wife and I are also always thinking about, okay, what's the best way to not just feed them so that they're growing appropriately, but set them up for a life of healthy eating. And so what we find from this research is that there's actually a tremendous amount of dynamism in the gut microbiome of children in this age. So we used to think that after that neonatal and infant period, things were more or less static. And of course, like I just said, we're finding that the gut microbiome is heavily influenced in this age range. And in particular, what we find is that taking in a diverse whole fruits, citrus, melons, berries, all of those fruits actually contribute very strongly to gut diversity. And then, as you would expect, eating eating whole grains rather than processed grains, eating plant-based proteins, so legumes, seeds, and nuts, those are all associated with healthy communities and structures within the microbiome of these children as well.
Okay, good. So it sounds like very similar, if not identical, to adults, would you say?
Yeah, and that's actually a really positive message, because I think that for individuals who are making healthy changes but aren't sure if that advice is appropriate for their kids, we already have a lot of data. And another piece of information that's so positive is there's a lot of pediatricians that are on this bandwagon as well. They're saying meteoric rises in childhood obesity, childhood diagnosed diabetes. And so pediatricians, because they see their patients at least every year, they're really attuned to the value of prevention and the kind of counseling that is much more rarely done amongst adults. And they're really encouraging this message of eating healthy, whole foods, minimize all of the beef, minimize the dairy. There was a big article that came out earlier this year about how we really need to change the advice that's given around dairy consumption aimed at kids. So there's a lot of different ways in which the healthcare provider community is pushing a message of trying to eat more whole foods and eating more plant foods rather than animal products for the health of kids.
Well, that's good. And my own thinking, I'd like to hear your opinion, is that a healthcare provider, when talking to someone during ages 2 to 9, is going to have a lot more impact. People aren't totally set in their ways as they are adults. I mean, I know myself as an adult, the hardest thing is to change a habit, any habit, you name it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that that's really true. Kids, in my experience, are incredibly open to new experiences, much more than adults. And I think we can learn a lot. One of the things I've learned as a parent is to have that childlike openness to new things. Kids will initially reject food, of course, but if you continuously offer kids certain foods and you do it in the right context, a positive atmosphere, and and really have a partnership with them, they, in my experience, respond really beautifully. And I think there's a lot and we also know that kids' taste changes over time, yet we forget that as adults. We think, oh, I don't like this. We make these kind of black and white pronouncements about what we do and don't like without recognizing that just like kids' tastes change over the course of their life, adults' tastes can change too. And I think that's something that most people who make the transition to whole food plant-based, whether it's a really abrupt transition or a slow one, over time, what you find is that your tastes change.
True. Okay, now tastes. I envision when we're talking about kids 2 to 9, all kinds of birthday parties, holiday celebrations with all kinds of junk food, cake, marketing with what I call food-like products, not real food. I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's like every child's dream, and every parent wants to make their kid happy, and they're all begging for this stuff. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Great question. It's a huge challenge, and it's important to recognize that we live in a context and an environment that's incredibly unhealthy. And so, as you know, when people say, well, moderation, that may work for some people, but the reality is we don't live in a world that makes it easy to be moderate, because we're constantly being provoked into these really unhealthy eating behaviors. And for kids, I think, the one blessing is that kids tend to be more resilient than adults physiologically. But like I said, with childhood obesity, that's only true to a certain degree. So I think the best thing we can do is model healthy behaviors for our kids, create a healthy eating environment at home, and do the best we can to reinforce that. And I think over time, kids are discerning and they realize which foods make them feel good and nourish and which ones don't. And if while they're kids, they may not have the same perspective as we do as adults in terms of valuing health, but those lessons stay with kids. And we can't control anyone completely but ourselves. And so I think to some degree, something I've learned as a parent is that I don't need to control all of my child's decisions. I just need to provide a really positive example, and then reinforce that they are capable of making good decisions themselves. And hopefully that ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I was going to say, I guess right along the same lines, they know from your example that this is important and it should be important. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway as a kid, if they realize you as a parent feel it's important or not, right?
Absolutely. And, my kids naturally, and I think this is true for a lot of kids, they have questions about the ethics of animal agriculture. And certainly if they knew what was happening to 99.9% of the meat production facilities in this country, they'd be asking very obvious questions about the ethics of that kind of food cultivation. And so, I think, and of course the environment is a very important and obvious thing for kids to ask about and be concerned about too. So as you educate your kids, obviously, you don't want to scare them, but I think that they intuit a lot of the important reasons to eat in a healthy way, because it doesn't just benefit their own health, it benefits other ethical concerns that even kids really understand in a visceral way.
Yeah, they can get behind that for sure. So one last little thing I want to point out, and this is subject maybe of another video, maybe,
Yeah.
but I feel like, this revelation, I suppose, with kids, because so much is not discussed with kids. It's really all the research I see out there is on adults. It's almost like with pets, and I know that that's kind of a new territory as well, plant-based eating for pets, but I feel like, my gut feeling anyway,
Yeah, pun intended.
pun intended. My gut feeling is that what's best for animals is also what's best for humans, to a large extent anyway. Maybe not exactly, but I feel like that's kind of what's going on here. We've got to keep that in mind. I think if we as adults keep that in mind, then I think we'll all be more successful too.
Well, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know much about the different nutritional needs of animals. But one thing we do know is that the only animals in the entire planet that are obese are the ones that live near humans. So the only animals that eat the food we eat become obese. There's no other animals in nature where you say, oh yeah, that one's obese and that one's not. They're all normal sized, except if they get around us. So there's clearly something that we're doing to our food that isn't healthy, and it doesn't just extend to us, it extends to the animals around us that we love. So I think there's definitely at least some truth there, though I'm not prepared now to make any definitive statements.
Right. And hopefully this is the beginning of us as the adult population right now making a change for the better, and then maybe in the future, what you say as humans, the ones being overweight, the only ones being overweight, maybe that'll revert back to not being the case anymore. That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Dr. Nick, thank you so much for all the information. Always great to hear from you and learn new things. And hopefully anybody out there, if you are thankful for this video, by all means, give us a comment, a like, share it with friends, anybody that could benefit from this knowledge. And Dr. Nick, also keep in mind, is a lifestyle medicine physician, and he does practice virtually, right? You can help anyone anywhere. So how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, check out my website, nickborhatmd.com. I'd love to get to know you and see if I can help you on your journey towards eating better and adopting a healthier lifestyle.
All right. Well, thanks so much again for the insight here with the younger age of our population.
Right.
Look forward to the next video.
Okay, great. Enjoyed being with you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.